I stayed for the children. That's what I told myself every time I thought about leaving. Every time the silence between us grew too heavy. Every time I lay awake at night in a bed that felt wider than it should have. Then one day, they grew up. They packed their things. They drove away. They started lives of their own. And I was left standing in a house that suddenly felt too quiet, next to a person I barely knew anymore. This isn't a story about regret. I don't regret staying. My children had a childhood. They had birthday parties and family dinners and 2 parents under one roof. But nobody tells you what happens when the reason you stayed walks out the door with a suitcase and a smile. Nobody tells you that the hardest part isn't the staying, it's what comes after. My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old now. I live in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business and the names of your children. I married Tom when I was 24. He was 26. He worked at the mill back then. I was a secretary at the church office. We met at a 4th of July picnic. He brought me lemonade. I thought he was handsome in a quiet way. We got married the following spring. For a while, it was good. Not perfect, but good. We had our first child when I was 26, a daughter. We named her Sarah. She had Tom's eyes and my stubborn streak. 2 years later came our son, Michael. He was quieter, thoughtful. Those early years were busy. There were diapers and late nights and birthday parties. There were school plays and soccer games and science projects spread across the kitchen table. Tom worked long hours at the mill. I stayed home with the children. That's what people did back then. You didn't question it. You just did it. I remember being tired most of the time, but I also remember being happy. Or maybe I just remember being too busy to notice I wasn't. The change didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a fight or a betrayal or a single moment I could point to. It was slower than that, quieter. Tom started working later, not every night, but often enough. He'd come home after the children were asleep. He'd eat dinner alone at the kitchen table while I cleaned up upstairs. We stopped talking about things that mattered. We talked about the mortgage, about Sarah's braces, about the car that needed fixing. But we stopped talking about us. I can't remember when we stopped laughing together. When we stopped holding hands, when the space between us in bed grew wider, it just happened, like seasons changing. Sarah was 10 when I first thought about leaving. It was a Tuesday morning. I was folding laundry in the living room. Tom had left for work without saying goodbye. Again. I stood there with one of his shirts in my hands and thought, I could leave. I could pack a bag, take the children, start over somewhere else. The thought terrified me, not because I was afraid of Tom. He was never cruel, never raised his voice, never raised his hand. He was just absent. Even when he was there, he wasn't there. But I looked at Sarah's school photo on the mantel, at Michael's baseball glove on the floor, at the life we'd built in that house. And I thought, they need stability. They need both parents. They need a home. So I folded the shirt and put it in the basket and pushed the thought away. I stayed for the children. That became my answer to everything. When my mother asked if Tom and I were happy, I said we were fine. When my friend Linda mentioned her own divorce over coffee, I listened with sympathy but thought, I could never do that to my kids. When I lay awake at night feeling lonely in my own bed, I reminded myself it's not about me anymore. The years passed. Sarah grew taller. She started high school. She had friends and boyfriends and dreams of going to college. Michael joined the track team. He was fast, quiet and fast. Tom and I became experts at coexisting. We had our routines, our separate lives under the same roof. He watched television in the den. I read in the bedroom. We ate dinner together because that's what families do. We went to church on Sundays because that's what people expected. We celebrated holidays and anniversaries. We smiled for photographs. From the outside, we looked fine. From the outside, we looked like any other family in town. But inside our house, there was a silence that neither of us knew how to break. I thought about leaving more often as the years went on, but every time, something stopped me. Sarah's graduation was coming up. Michael was struggling with math and needed help. There was always a reason to wait, always a reason to stay. I told myself I was being strong, being selfless. I told myself that good mothers put their children first, and I did. I put them first every single day. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every game, every recital. I packed lunches and helped with homework and stayed up late sewing costumes for school plays. I was there, always there. And in being there for them, I forgot how to be there for myself. I forgot what I liked, what I wanted. I forgot who I was outside of being Sarah's mother and Michael's mother and Tom's wife. I became a collection of roles, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being Margaret. Sarah left for college when she was 18. We drove her to Pittsburgh on a hot August morning. The car was packed so full you could barely see out the back window. She was excited, nervous, ready. Tom and I helped her carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs to her dorm room. We met her roommate. We made her bed with the sheets I'd bought special. When it was time to leave, she hugged us both. "I love you guys," she said. "We love you too," I said. Tom nodded, put his hand on her shoulder, and then we drove home. The house felt different when we got back. Sarah's room was empty, her posters still on the walls, her stuffed animals still on the shelf, but she was gone. Michael was starting his senior year. 1 more year, and he'd be gone too. I stood in the kitchen that night and realized, my job is almost done. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it brought panic. I poured myself a glass of water and looked out the window at the backyard, at the swing set Tom had built when the kids were small, at the garden I used to tend before I got too busy. Tom was in the den watching the news. We were alone in the house together, and we had nothing to say to each other. That's when I knew I had stayed for the children. But the children were leaving, and soon there would be no buffer between us, no reason to pretend, no excuse to avoid the truth. Michael graduated the following May. It was a warm evening. The ceremony was held outside on the football field. I sat between Tom and my mother and watched our son walk across the stage. He shook hands with the principal, took his diploma, smiled for the camera. I cried, not because I was sad. I was proud, so proud, but also because I knew this was the end of something. Michael had been accepted to a college 3 hours away. He'd be leaving in August. 3 months, and then the house would be empty. That summer felt strange. Michael worked part-time at the hardware store. He spent time with his friends. He was home, but not really home, already halfway gone. Tom and I moved around each other carefully. We were polite, distant. We talked about Michael's college plans, about the weather, about things that didn't matter. We didn't talk about what would happen when Michael left. We didn't talk about us. I think we were both afraid. August came too quickly. We packed Michael's car on a Sunday morning. He didn't have as much stuff as Sarah. A few boxes, some clothes, his laptop. We drove him to his dorm, helped him unpack. He hugged me goodbye in the parking lot. "Thanks, Mom," he said, "for everything." "You're going to do great," I told him. He hugged Tom too, and then he walked into his new life. Tom and I drove home in silence. It was a 3-hour drive. Neither of us said a word. When we got home, I walked through the house. Sarah's room, empty. Michael's room, empty. The whole house felt like an echo. I made dinner that night because I didn't know what else to do. Tom and I sat at the kitchen table, just the two of us. For the first time in 28 years, it was just the two of us. I looked at him across the table. This man I'd married, this man I'd built a life with, and I realized I didn't know him anymore. I didn't know what he thought about, what he cared about. I didn't know if he was happy or sad or anything at all. We'd spent nearly 3 decades under the same roof, but we'd become strangers. "This is strange," I said finally. Tom looked up from his plate. "What is?" "This, just us." He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said, "it is." We finished dinner in silence. The weeks after Michael left were the hardest. I didn't know what to do with myself. For 28 years, my life had revolved around my children, their schedules, their needs. Now there were no lunches to pack, no permission slips to sign, no games to attend. The silence in the house was overwhelming. I tried to fill it. I cleaned. I organized closets that didn't need organizing. I cooked elaborate meals that Tom barely noticed. I called Sarah and Michael every few days. They were busy with classes and new friends and new lives. They didn't need me the way they used to, and that was good. That's what I wanted for them. But it left me with a question I didn't know how to answer. What now? Tom and I existed in the same space. We had breakfast together. We watched television in separate rooms. We went to bed at different times. We were roommates, polite, civil, unhappy. I thought about leaving again, but this time it was different. This time there was no reason to stay. The children were grown. They had their own lives. They didn't need me to keep the house together anymore. But I still didn't leave. Not right away. Because after all those years of staying for someone else, I'd forgotten how to make a choice for myself. I'd forgotten what I even wanted. One night in October, I couldn't sleep. I got up and went downstairs to the kitchen, made myself tea. I sat at the table in the dark and thought about my life. I thought about the girl I'd been at 24, bright-eyed and hopeful. I thought about the choices I'd made, the life I'd built. I thought about the parts of myself I'd given away. Not to Tom, not really. To the idea of being a good wife, a good mother. To the belief that my job was to hold everything together, even when it meant I was falling apart. I cried that night, not loud. Just quiet tears in the dark kitchen. I cried for the years I'd lost, for the marriage that had died so slowly I hadn't noticed, for the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. When Tom came downstairs an hour later for water, he found me there. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked at him, and for the first time in years I told the truth. "No," I said, I'm not." He sat down across from me. "Me neither," he said quietly. We sat there in the dark for a long time, not talking, just sitting. Two people who'd spent most of their lives together and barely knew each other anymore. We didn't make any big decisions that night, but something shifted. We started talking. Not about the mortgage or the car or what was for dinner. About us. About how we'd gotten here. About how long it had been since we'd been happy. About whether we'd ever been happy at all. It was hard. Some of those conversations hurt. Tom admitted he'd felt like a stranger in his own home for years. That he'd buried himself in work because he didn't know how to connect anymore. I admitted I'd stayed out of obligation, that I'd been thinking about leaving for more than a decade. We didn't yell, we didn't blame, we were just honest. And the honesty revealed something we'd both known but never said. We'd stayed for the children, and now the children were gone. We talked about divorce. We talked about trying to fix things. We talked about what we wanted for the rest of our lives. Tom said he didn't know. I said I didn't either, but for the first time I felt like I had permission to ask the question. Not what's best for the children, but what's best for me. We separated that winter, not officially at first. Tom started sleeping in the guest room. Then he started looking for his own place. It was amicable. Sad, but amicable. We told Sarah and Michael over the phone. Together. They were shocked, but also not shocked. Sarah said she'd always known something was off. Michael said he understood. They were adults now. They had their own lives. Our divorce wouldn't shatter their childhood. That had already happened. We'd already given them that. Tom moved out in February. I helped him pack. It felt surreal, standing in our bedroom, my bedroom now, watching him fold clothes into boxes. "I'm sorry," he said at one point. "For what?" "For not being what you needed." I thought about that for a moment. "I don't think either of us was what the other needed," I said. "Not for a long time." He nodded. "But we raised good kids." "We did," I agreed. And that was true. Whatever else had gone wrong, we'd done that right. When Tom's car pulled out of the driveway for the last time, I stood on the porch and watched him go. I didn't cry. I just felt light, like I'd been holding my breath for 30 years and finally let it out. The first few months alone were strange. The house was too quiet. I didn't know what to do with all the space, all the time. I'd spent so long being needed that I didn't know how to just be. I started small. I cleaned out the garage, donated things we'd been holding on to for no reason. I painted Sarah's old room a soft blue, turned it into a reading room. I joined a book club at the library. I took a watercolor class on Wednesday evenings. I learned that I liked painting, that I was actually not bad at it. I made a friend named Ruth. She was 65 and divorced and funny in a dry way that made me laugh. We had coffee every Thursday morning. It was nice. Having a friend who didn't know me as Tom's wife or Sarah's mother or Michael's mother, just as Margaret. Sarah came home for Thanksgiving that first year. She walked through the house and noticed the changes, the reading room, the new curtains in the kitchen. "It looks different," she said. "Good different?" I asked. She smiled. "Yeah, good different." We talked that weekend, really talked. She asked if I was happy. I thought about it. "I'm getting there," I said. "Good," she said. "You deserve to be happy, Mom." That made me cry a little. because I'd spent so long thinking I didn't deserve to want happiness, that wanting something for myself was selfish. But Sarah didn't think so. Neither did Michael when I talked to him later. They wanted me to be happy, just like I'd wanted them to be. Tom and I finalized the divorce the following spring. We met at the lawyer's office, signed papers, shook hands. "Take care of yourself, Margaret," he said. "You too, Tom." And that was it. 30 years of marriage. Over. I thought I'd feel sadder, but mostly I felt relieved. I drove home and sat in my kitchen, and felt the weight lift. I was 64 years old. I'd spent the first half of my life building something I thought I was supposed to want. Now I had a chance to figure out what I actually wanted. I started traveling, nothing extravagant. Weekend trips, a week in Maine, a few days in the mountains, places I'd always wanted to see but never had time for. I read books I'd been meaning to read. I took long walks. I learned to be comfortable with silence, not the heavy silence of a failing marriage, but the peaceful silence of being alone with yourself. I wasn't lonely. I was just alone, and there's a difference. I saw Tom occasionally, at family events, graduations, holidays. We were cordial, kind. He seemed lighter, too. He'd started dating someone, a woman named Patricia. She was nice. I was happy for him, not in a bitter way, genuinely happy. We'd both spent too long being unhappy together. Now we had a chance to be happy apart. Sarah got engaged that summer. She called me, breathless and excited, to tell me the news. I cried happy tears on the phone. She asked if I thought it was too soon, if she was too young. I said, "Do you love him?" "Yes." "Does he make you happy?" "So happy, Mom." "Then it's not too soon." She was quiet for a moment. "I want to do it differently than you and Dad," she said softly. "I know," I said. "You will." And I meant it. I didn't want her to make the same choices I did. I wanted her to build something real, something honest, something that didn't require her to lose herself along the way. The wedding was beautiful. Tom and I walked her down the aisle together. It felt right. Whatever had happened between us. We'd made something good. We'd made Sarah, we'd made Michael, and they were happy. They were whole. That had to count for something. I'm 68 now. I live alone in the house I used to share with Tom and the children. Some days I think about moving, getting something smaller, but I'm not ready yet. This house holds memories, good ones and hard ones. It's where I raised my children. It's where I learned who I was and who I wasn't. I still paint on Wednesday evenings. Ruth and I still have coffee every Thursday. I visit Sarah and her husband a few times a year. They live 2 states away now. They're talking about having children. Michael lives closer. He comes by for dinner once a month. He brings his girlfriend sometimes. She's smart, kind. I like her. My life is quiet now, but it's mine. I don't answer to anyone. I don't sacrifice myself for anyone. I make choices based on what I want, and that still feels new, still feels strange. After so many years of putting everyone else first, it's hard to put myself first. But I'm learning. I'm learning that staying wasn't wrong. My children needed me, and I was there for them. But staying forever would have been wrong. There's a difference between sacrifice and self-erasure. I sacrificed a lot of years, but I didn't have to erase myself completely. I just didn't know that at the time. I thought being a good mother meant disappearing. meant putting myself last. But my children didn't need me to disappear. They needed me to be whole. And I wasn't whole for a long time. I was scattered, spread thin, holding everything together except myself. Now I'm putting myself back together, piece by piece. Some days are easier than others. Some days I still feel guilty for choosing myself, for leaving, for wanting more. But most days I feel at peace. I did what I thought was right at the time. I stayed for the children. And when they grew up, I found the courage to leave. Not just the marriage, but the version of myself that believed staying was all I deserved. I deserve more than that. I deserve happiness, peace, a life that's mine. And so do you. If you stayed for the children, you're not wrong. You're not weak. You did what love asked of you. But when the children grow up, and they will grow up, you have to ask yourself, what now? What do you want for the rest of your life? And do you have the courage to reach for it? I think about the woman I was at 24 sometimes, the one who married Tom on a spring afternoon, the one who thought love was enough. I wish I could tell her that it's not, that love isn't enough when you lose yourself, that sacrifice is noble, but only if it doesn't cost you everything. But I don't regret the choices I made. I can't, because those choices gave me Sarah and Michael. Those choices taught me what I'm capable of, what I can endure, what I'm worth. I stayed for the children. Then they grew up, and I got to grow up too, into the woman I was always meant to be, the woman who knows her worth, the woman who chooses herself, not because she's selfish, but because she's finally learned that she matters too. So I'll ask you, did you ever stay in a marriage for the children? What did you discover about yourself when your children grew up? Were you able to choose yourself, or are you still learning how? I'd like to know. Because if there's one thing I've learned in all these years, it's this. We're not alone in our struggles. We're not alone in our sacrifices. And we're not alone in our second chances. There's time. There's always time to start again, to choose differently, to become who we were meant to be. I'm still becoming. And maybe you are too.